Welcome back to the Framework Podcast. I'm David Waselko, your co-host, along with Tyler Burke. How are you this evening?
I'm awesome.
Good.
Seems to be consistent.
That is a theme with you.
I like it.
Awesomeness.
Yeah.
What makes you awesome? Makes things awesome.
This podcast. No, things are good. Had an epic day today, and it's always good to be able to create something from nothing and then get a tremendous response from it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good for you.
Yeah, nothing better.
Nothing better than that. Few things better than that.
Very few.
Very few. All right. So today, we're going to talk about something that we don't have a whole lot of explanations for, specific prescriptions for, but we have some ideas about.
Yeah, we really have nothing to say.
Well, I wouldn't say we have nothing to say.
Okay, well, what is your point? We have nothing. We don't have it. We're not going to, it's not a to-do list.
Well, my point, Mr. Awesomeness, is that we're going to acknowledge that this thing that we're going to talk about is very real, but we've got some unique ideas about it.
Some good perspectives.
I think some good perspectives on it. And I think, to your point, when we were talking off air about this, good for us not to be super prescriptive on this, because it's really quite varying and dependent upon perspectives.
There's a lot of variables in this one for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it is the epidemic, and we're going to use that word intentionally, purposefully, because it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
The epidemic of male loneliness. You mentioned earlier, even the Surgeon General has come out and spoken to the deleterious organic health effects of loneliness upon people, and in particular men. And what we know with regard to loneliness, of course, women get lonely, men also get lonely, but loneliness has a disproportionate effect on men. A quick little Google research tells us that for men since 1990, the number of close friendships that men have has decreased fivefold since 1990. And interestingly, although younger men are supposed to be sort of equipped with more communication skills and sensitivity and all the other things, they're the most isolated. That age, that cohort report higher levels of loneliness than any of the other age groups when this kind of survey research occurs.
18 to 24?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Fivefold is a lot.
Fivefold is a ton.
Especially when you don't have five friends.
Right. That takes you to the good old null. Right? You be the Lone Ranger and you are lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's painful.
Yeah.
Really painful. So yeah, a fivefold decrease in the matter of, a handful of years. I mean, 30 years, 35 years. That's a lot. So
that's a lot, yeah.
Rapid drop.
You didn't realize that 1990 was 35 years ago, did you?
I did, and then I didn't want to acknowledge it because 35 years ago at 1990, my ass was graduating from high school, and I don't want to have to say that, but yeah, I did not realize it was 35 years.
Good Lord. Okay.
I can't believe it.
Huh? I wasn't even driving yet.
Eat a dick.
Point taken.
Yeah. You're going to be lonely here in a minute.
I was 15 for the
Well, so yeah, you were driving illegally, but yeah, I was graduating from high school in 1990, for God's sakes.
Okay.
So, but we can all point to the typical suspects about why that's happening. The biggest one is sort of social media, internet, all the other stuff. But there's some other things, especially when we start talking about applying the framework, because that's what we do here. The framework is a value-free constellation of thinking tools and communication tools that everybody can learn, and you can apply it globally. You can apply it generally to all manner of problems that are relational. And that's good for you because, by definition, all problems are relational. Everything is relationship. and conflicts in relationships or disputes regarding the rules. So,
And may I add, I wouldn't
you
even
may.
say you apply it to problems, but it's also a very effective tool to avoid problems
Mm-hmm.
and to maintain and create healthy relationships.
Absolutely.
Problem free.
Problem.
Well, problems lesser.
Yeah, solution oriented.
Yeah.
We acknowledge what the problem is, but then we move towards solution instead of whining about the existence of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got to acknowledge it, it's real. But we don't just stay there. We're like, okay, these are the problems, so then let's move to solution, and that's different. That's definitely therapy done different.
Yeah.
So some of the rules that I think are affecting this go to the heart of masculinity itself. We are trained and socialized as men to sort of be stoic, to be self-reliant. There's this idea of the alpha male who's sort of unbothered and unaffected and able to be alone and all that. And so we're really working against ourselves. And I got to say, a lot of women are working against men on this too, because women have that expectation sometimes that men be that and do that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I don't think it's controversial to say that women are infinitely better at developing, maintaining friendships, mitigating loneliness than men probably ever have been or ever will be. And we could learn a lot, us men. We can learn a lot from what women do it, how they do it, and why they do it
Mm-hmm.
in order to address this epidemic.
Are you going to tell us to talk a lot?
I'm going to tell you to talk more.
That was a joke about women.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But you don't have to go straight into all the ways you feel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. What did you say about the Surgeon General said that loneliness in terms of its effect on organic health is equatable to how many cigarettes
15 cigarettes a day. It's actually why I started smoking again after I made some friends. Terrible joke, but that's terrible, right? 15 cigarettes a day. That's crazy.
Right. So, and I don't think anybody, well, very few people are disputing the negative effect over time cumulatively of smoking 15 cigarettes a day,
Even
right?
smokers don't deny that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. So, physical stress, organic stress, mental health stress, all of it comes in on this problem of loneliness, and it's a real problem. So, as we like to do, we like to kind of start with definitions. I think it's always important to have operational definitions when you're going to enter into a conversation about anything.
That's why you're so fun to talk to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Excitement when it comes to the
Yeah.
thesaurus dictionary. But it keeps us efficient. It keeps us on track
Exactly.
instead of getting lost. So loneliness is not a state of solitude, nor is loneliness being alone or being independent. And we're going to talk about this, but I would argue that one of the very important antidotes to loneliness and a skill that we have to develop and to cultivate is the art of being alone and being comfortable being alone and cultivating that independent life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So being alone is not loneliness, and being in a state of solitude is not loneliness.
Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be. Now, there's another one here that it's not. And I think right away, here's where we get confused and struggle in terms of words and definitions, dialogue, and the subject of the epidemic of male loneliness. It's also not boredom. Boredom and loneliness can co-occur, but just because a person is bored doesn't mean they're lonely. And I think a lot of times what happens is people realize how bored they are. They look around and there's nobody sitting next to them who's also equally bored. And then all of a sudden they notice they're lonely.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not contending with the loneliness thing as long as they're not bored. So when they're not bored because they're attached to the bug light and looking at social media, or they're immersed in hours upon hours of video games and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, they don't notice during that time necessarily that they're lonely because they're entertaining themselves and trying to solve the boredom problem. But then the moment they get bored and there isn't anything to do to distract,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it's like they recognize, oh my goodness, I'm really lonely. Go ahead.
Mhm.
You were going
No,
to say
you
something.
you said it. I think that all too often that's just a distraction
Hmm.
from the real thing.
From the real thing.
Mhm.
It is. It's a veneer
Yeah.
of connection rather than the establishment of it. So our take here when we're trying to define loneliness is to say what it really is a lack of social connection and interdependence.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's the problem. And we like to do problem identification, not problem focus, because you can't move to solution until you've identified what the fucking problem is, right?
Mhm.
So the problem of loneliness, we think, at least at our current level of understanding, is best understood, best described as a lack of social connection and interdependence. Okay. So, what do you do about this, especially given the rules of what it is to be a man traditionally conceived of stoicism and self reliance and the alpha ideal and all that? Um, what do you do about it? How are you encountering it? What are some solutions? That's the subject.
And it can be shocking. I remember directly after I got separated, and having the physical absence uh, into an absolute, like, being the only one in a room for the first time was
Yep.
shocking,
Yes.
and very, very difficult.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can relate to that too, not just in that kind of way, but the feeling of kind of always alone or always lonely, never alone.
Hmm.
You can be around a bunch of people frequently
Yeah.
or infrequently,
Yeah.
but feel very much alone in the world,
Hmm.
feel very lonely because you're not having that meaningful socially based, not just connection, but I think it's the two things together. It's connection, but also interdependence,
Hmm.
which of course is to be contrasted with dependence. And this is one of the things that I think is problematic for and contributing to the problem for men. Men tend to depend on their romantic relationships for social connections. So if something happens to that romantic relationship, or if they just sort of shift into neutral or even get lazy about it and depend upon their wife or their partner to set that up and establish it, um, that dependence really prevents any kind of connection or interdependence because you're consistently leaning on your partner to facilitate a social life and any form of connectedness instead of being able to have the skills and deploy that independently uh, for yourself.
Hmm. Do you think that's what's the word? Uh, you said that oftentimes men are dependent on their partner for that. Is that even a positive thing in many? I'm just thinking back in my own uh, life too. Do you find in your practice that that's usually like they look at that as a positive,
They look at what as a positive.
that their partner is the one sort of initiating the social dynamic, or is that something that uh, can be burdensome as well?
I think that men can look at it as positive because they're lazy and they don't have to contend with it or deal with it, for example. But I could tell you that the wives do not look at it as positive after a brief period of time.
Mm,
So, in other words, because women are relationally oriented and they're so good at this, women want to help the men that they love, the men that they care for, cultivate and develop those friendships and those relationships, generally speaking. And women are also, what I find frequently is they're exhausted by feeling responsible for having to manage so many things in the life, including, let's say, the social calendar,
Mhm.
right? And I think when men become dependent upon their women to do that, they're transferring a responsibility and therefore kind of transferring a burden upon their spouse to be the one who does all the heavy lifting on that and does all the reach outs and does the consistent communication, comes up with ideas to get everyone together and, let's go here this month, or have people over here this month, or let's
Mhm.
do this fun thing. So the women are having to manage the social calendars, and the men are just, kind of like the old adage about the wedding, just tell me when and where to show up and what to wear, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So men are being super, super passive in this, and I think kind of lazy in this oftentimes. And then I think the other way where it shows up is where there's a competition or a rule dispute between a couple over whether or not we sort of like or approve of someone's friends and what happens when those friends get together.
Mhm.
So if you have a friend group, that's a great friend group, but what you primarily do is go to the titty bar and get hammered and everything else. That's not going to really go over too well in many relationship configurations either way. So yeah, it is a problem. Women realize that men are suffering, but then women start to lose a little bit of tolerance for that suffering because they notice that the guys really aren't doing a whole lot to do anything about it. And they're kind of depending on them or sliding into neutral to have that sort of taken care of for them. And it's deleterious to both parties. It becomes an excessive amount of responsibility or work that their wife or girlfriend or partner has to play. But it also means that the guy is out of practice. He's not consistently deploying those skills or cultivating those relationship skills and is letting those skills atrophy. And then they get to a point where they feel really uncomfortable and they lack confidence doing it independently or even sort of in a group setting. So it can be really problematic.
Do you find that there's a lack of opportunity for men to go out and make new relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, go ahead.
No, I just
I think
no.
that opportunity is both real in terms of constraint and artificial in terms of
Mm,
constraint.
right.
So, you think about a good man, if that man is, employed and married and has kids, well, those are priorities one, two, and three, right? And they're really investing the bulk of their limited time, energy, and resources into doing well at
Mhm.
those three things.
Mhm.
And one of the things that men have learned over time, and a message that's been sent to men consistently over time, is you got to stop fucking around over here and you got to focus on what's important. You got to focus on being an engaged and available parent. You got to focus on being an engaged and available partner and husband, spouse. And of course, you got to focus on being an engaged worker, whether you're running your own business or you're working for somebody else. I mean, that's important too. So the constraints in terms of time and energy resources to cultivate much of anything outside of those three things is extraordinarily challenging,
Mm.
right? Yet, guess who's doing that all the time anyway, despite those same constraints and those same challenges? Women. So I think in many ways they're just better at it. They have a natural affinity to it, perhaps more than men do.
Mhm.
They get more reps practicing that skill. But I think also the rules that govern relationships, women to women, very different from the rules that govern relationships men to men.
The first thing that comes to my mind is complex versus simple.
Mhm. Meaning,
Well, women are complex beasts. Men are simple.
mhm.
I'm just here to throw in some comedic humor, not make important points here, David.
That's nonsense.
Okay.
You do both. But no, yeah, I mean, we are human beings are complex creatures. We all have a complexity to us.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that it's complexity as much as it is um, awareness and interest in the value of social connection and interdependence. I think women are more astute when it comes to the value of that than men are. And I think men, being generally task oriented creatures, where women are generally relationally oriented creatures, contributes to that. Certainly, there's a biological difference there that I think is reasonable to state as fact. Um, but I also think it has to do with an essence of human nature is that we are all, male and female, designed to be social creatures. We are designed to be around the campfire,
Mhm.
right? And we suffer when we don't have that to varying degrees. And it's easy to justify the lack of investment in those things under the banner of responsibility for marriage, kids, and work. But just because you have an ability to justify it doesn't mean it's healthy or useful for you. And
Mhm.
one of the big problems with really investing in all that, for example, is if you put the kids first and the kids are your number one thing, well, eventually the kids are going to promote and they're going to get out of the house. And then what? You know,
Mhm.
you got nothing left and you haven't been doing anything that whole time other than that. So now you got 18, 22, 23 years of doing things one way. And then all of a sudden you got to figure out how to start doing something a different way. And that's daunting to say the least.
Mhm.
Whereas if you've maintained this consistently by cultivating your interests and developing and broadening your interests independent of those things, those very important things, now you have more balance, you have more health. But, you know, when the kids grow up, you're not sitting there trying to figure out what the hell to do with yourself and with your life and with your marriage relationship because, you know,
I do like that you sort of differentiated life with work, family, kids, and the all of that, because logistically that can be much more difficult in just the pure logistics of time, and because it can feel very selfish to get away from to sort of quote unquote leave your responsibilities to go
mhm,
out with the fellas or go have fun or something,
right,
as opposed to empty nesting
right,
where time is very, very different, um, and usually uh, logistically much simpler.
much simpler. Yeah. So it's a,
Yeah.
in one way, it's an easier problem to fix when you're an empty nester because you have more time, but it's harder there because you have less experience because you
Hmm.
shut down those skills for a long period of time.
Hmm.
Over here, it's harder because of time, but it's easier because you're closer in proximity to the times in which you were consistently deploying those skills because all throughout your school life, and then including going into college, if you went to college, you're doing that friendship skill all the time
Hmm.
and you're spending time together and you're connecting and you're making new friends and you're solidifying your friend group, right?
Hmm.
So it's a challenge on both sides of it, but what's universally true is the necessity of it. And what is even more compelling is the damage and the deleterious effect when we notice its pronounced absence.
Hmm. So I think it's important to sort of address the idea that in scenario one where we've got young kids or work responsibilities, family, all of that, that it's okay
Hmm.
to take the time and make the investment, because that's really what we're talking about, right? Is making an investment in ourself through cultivating relationships
Yes.
that will help us be a better father and partner and everything else, to make that investment, even though it is going to be sacrifice something
Yep.
of time. We've all got the same amount of limited time. Priorities of that time will have to shift
Yep.
a bit. But I know that just feeling like there's, because it's somewhat common. Do you hear everything?
Yeah.
You keep talking. I just lost sound.
it, okay. Well, let me throw in something as you're dealing with technical difficulties there. Um, an additional reason why I think it's so important to do this cultivation and this investment when you are in that season of life where you're parenting and your marriage and you're trying to build a career is that, remember, parenting is about modeling behaviors and the children are paying attention all the time. And so if the behavior that you model is that you sacrifice all that in order to become parents, then what happens to that generation of kids that you're raising? Well, they repeat what they've learned, and they think that in order to be good parents, they've got to shut down that friendship social life. That's not really a lesson that we would want to teach them. So if we're saying to them, hey, be very judicious about the friends that you make in your social group matters and it's important. And yeah, it's normal. It's good to spend time with your friends. But you're living in a way that's inconsistent with that and you don't do any of that, then you're not modeling the behaviors that you're wanting to teach and imbue, into the kids. Moreover, I think directly to your point, we become better at all those things
Mhm.
when we're experiencing need fulfillment with friendships
Yeah.
and not experiencing that loneliness. I know so many people in my clinical experiences who are married and have kids and have a career and are terribly lonely. And they'll say in those vulnerable moments in therapy, because they know they can, because therapy is a safe place for vulnerability, they'll come right out and say, I have no friends and I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to do. I hear this from men so much. I really don't hardly ever hear this from women, but I hear it the vast majority of time with men, whether they're single, whether they're married, whether they have kids, whether they don't, whether they're done raising kids, whatever. It's so common. So when whoever the proverbial they is, coined the term epidemic of male loneliness, that's the appropriate word.
Mm.
This is not just here and there, and it's not just 20%. And I'd say it's closer to the 70-80% range. That's anecdotal. I don't know what the data is on that either in my practice or just globally. But anecdotally, I would estimate within my own practice, probably 75 to 80%.
Well, it helps that women have the supernatural ability to become best friends in 3 seconds.
In 3 seconds. Right. We were joking about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, no, I mean, what is that movie? Uh, oh, Step Brothers. It's like,
Yeah.
did we just become best friends? Yep. Like I've even seen women do that skit
I have
in a
too.
moment, and it's funny, but it's so true.
Yeah.
I've never had that experience in my life.
Yeah. And I think in ways it's because of these rules about manliness and masculinity, about be stoic and be self-reliant and be
Mhm.
composed and be all that, right? But yeah, it's almost a meme where it's like, you're drinking a cosmopolitan? I like cosmopolitans too. Let's
Mhm.
be besties,
Yeah. Yeah.
And they make sure to take a picture of the event
Mhm.
and they make sure to trade phone numbers afterwards.
Mhm.
But then they do, that is, women do the real, genuine, heavy lifting work. They actually call or text that person when they said they were going to.
Mhm.
And then that person responds. And then this goes back and forth and a friendship develops. Whereas with guys, they'll be like, yeah, man, I'll call you. And then, however you make the
Oh,
cricket
yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
Guys, either because you're lazy or because of your prohibitive thinking or because you think it's not really that big of a deal or whatever, don't do any of that. And then all of a sudden look around and say, I got no friends. There's this epidemic of male loneliness, and all those things are true and all those things are real. But why? Because
Mm.
those skills that you see your girlfriend or your wife or whomever deploying, brother, you've got those skills. You deploy them in other situations. So it's not a capacity problem. It's what? A willingness problem, a comfort confidence problem. a I don't want to be that guy prohibitive thinking problem, which I think is what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, this is an easy fix. It really is an easy fix. And one of the things that men could really do a good job of is learning from women how to do this very thing. Get out of your own way, drop your ego, drop your pride, and say, oh, you're a Coors Light drinker? Yeah, me too. And off to the races you can go.
Yeah. And I will say, I do think there is a bit of a cultural thing here too,
Yeah.
meaning across the board, because I have struggled with this my entire adult life, and still not awesome at it. But I do know I can think of one time specifically where I did reach out and do that on the golf course, um, and then texted and did the follow up and do nothing to the crickets on the other side.
Right.
I mean, I did touch his ass when I said goodbye, so maybe he got the wrong idea. I don't know,
Got the wrong impression.
but
No, and that, what you're talking about there is rejection
mhm,
and maybe feelings of embarrassment, feelings of discomfort, right? But I think the other thing to notice is the phrase, I did this one time.
mhm.
And so tell me, what are you all good at? And you're good because you did it one time, and that one time you did it good. Yeah. So there's where the crickets really chime in.
Uh,
So we can say, hey, man, I tried this and it sucked. I'm not doing that again. Right. Well, okay. You can take that approach if you want to. But tell me anything that you've ever gotten any good at in your life. You had to have done it more than once, and you probably didn't do it good the first time you did it. You have to do it again and again and again.
yeah.
And one of the things I've learned from my woman in this is, she's like, she has faced this all the time too. Please do not misunderstand us and think that women don't go through the same damn thing, because they do. Women try to connect with other women and they get stonewalled. They get, not responded to, or they
Mhm.
get treated poorly, or what have you. But it really comes down to the intentional commitment to put the work in to do this. This is one thing that I learned from my woman all the time. She's like, you got to put the work in when it comes to the friendship piece. And she's been hurt many times. She's been betrayed. She's been shat upon, by these bitches that, do these different things, right? But she doesn't.
Shat upon?
Shat upon.
Okay.
Yes, shat upon. It's a fancy way of saying shit on,
I got
right?
you. I
Yeah.
got you.
I just like shat
I
upon. It
like
sounds
it.
kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when a bird, I always say,
Got
I've been shat upon.
been shat on. Yeah. I actually got shit on by a bird walking into high school.
What?
Yeah. Bird shit straight on me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was high school.
High school. Yeah. Perfect time for that.
Of
Yeah.
course it is. Right. Yeah. I was shat upon
I just went home.
I was shat upon as a kid by a fucking goose when I was leaving like a field after playing someone, and it hit like my head, and it did the whole like egg thing
Oh.
down.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that may have been where my hatred for birds came from.
The
I hate
chatting.
birds.
Mm.
Flying shit machines.
Mm.
Useless, disease infested pieces of shit. But I digress.
Fuck birds.
Fuck birds. So
Anywho.
there's a stick to itiveness that also needs to be a part of this that many women do particularly well. So even though they've had the daunting, difficult, embarrassing, or even hurtful experience of someone not reciprocating those efforts, or someone not honoring their commitment, or saying yes but really meaning something else, that doesn't mean they stop trying. And I think one of the things that we can really learn from women on that is kind of like the work ethic that it takes. Because when we're talking about making an investment in things, what is that? It's not just a one-time thing and then you
Mhm.
hope that everything goes well, right? Investment is continually touching something, continually putting effort into something, continually being intentional about something. That's how we get good at anything. So if we're really lonely and we don't have any friends, and we've had a couple of difficult or awkward or bad experiences trying to rectify that, don't let that be the thing that stops you. You just keep putting yourself out. Because honestly, what do you have to lose?
Well, you could say the same thing about approaching a woman.
Exactly.
And everything that you just said is totally true. But uh, I know that my lack of ability on both levels was purely tied to confidence in both scenarios,
Hmm.
because it was impossible. In fact, I never did it when my confidence was just completely in the toilet.
Hmm.
So to your point of making, some self investment in some things, um, thinking about confidence, and maybe you can speak even to addressing lack of confidence with this, because I think it's probably the biggest barrier, more so than laziness or anything else. I think probably lack of confidence is it.
I think you're right. And
Usually, yeah.
confidence is improved and enhanced when skill goes up. So, in dating experiences, when your relational skills elevated, meaning ability to communicate, ability to talk about the rules, ability to listen and to relate and all that, it helps us become infinitely more confident with the
Mhm,
vulnerability of dating and asking for what we want and all those other things. You've
mhm,
described it previously in other podcasts as kind of like the
mhm,
acquisition of a superpower.
mhm,
And yes, having confidence in maintaining friendships just as important like it is in dating. So how do we do that? And our advice on this, or idea really on this, is that you be willing to explore and experiment with things you do, hobbies you do that can then be an interest that you cultivate as an investment in yourself. And you develop and you broaden that skill so that you can contribute that skill as a mutual or shared interest in the tribe that does this. Okay, so now that sounds sort of vague or opaque. It's just the outline of what we're recommending or suggesting you consider doing to help with this. A really good example, and we go to this frequently now, is golf, right? So let's say that you maybe have an interest, or maybe you've never even tried playing or whatever. Golf is a wonderful way to make friends, because there's places where people do this. There's a lot of people that do this. There's a lot of opportunities to put yourself in a position for social interaction forth when it comes to this. So, if we're talking about explore and experiment and cultivate and invest, what we're saying is you be deliberate and intentional about doing what you can to acquire some skills with regard to playing golf. And so maybe you go to the practice range, you go to the putting range, maybe you get a one-on-one lesson, you do whatever, and you start developing some skills so that you become a little bit more comfortable and confident with what? With the game of golf. And then when you have a little bit of that comfort and confidence, you can take that to the course and you can play with others. You can get paired up with others, right? You're not going to show up as a single and then say, you don't have anyone to play with. We're not going to let you play. That's not how it works, right? You're going to instantaneously be paired with whoever's there in that tea time.
I've never been paired with just a dick either,
You,
oddly enough.
I'm
You
glad
know,
you said that because I say that a lot. When I
listen.
think one of the really redeeming things about golf is I never have experienced that either.
Mhm,
Every single person I've ever been paired with that we've been paired with has
mhm,
been not only pleasant and
mhm.
respectful, but nice, enjoyable, right? So
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
it's true. But the point is, you're doing something difficult, which is trying to position yourself to make friends, make connections, social connections. So you're mitigating the vulnerability of that with the confidence piece because you have something in common, golf, and you can play, let's say, reasonably well. Or at least you're not that guy who is just
Mhm,
obnoxious or a douchebag or whatever.
mhm.
Now you're putting yourself in a position to find a tribe. It's a common interest, it's an activity, it's something that you can invest in privately and personally to get a little bit better, build your confidence, and then you can go out there and you can interact with other people who are similarly situated. They're interested in the same thing,
Mhm.
right? So that's a great example of investing in yourself, exploring, experimenting, cultivating an interest so that you can contribute to a mutual shared interest. And the same would be true with painting or axe throwing or whatever it is, whatever you're interested in. If you're willing to explore that interest, to experiment with that interest, and then start to cultivate it, there is a place out there where other people do the same thing. If you can bring some skills to that same thing, that same place where other people are doing that, you have just positioned yourself to get around like minded people and start potentially developing those friendships and
Mhm.
deal directly with loneliness.
I think that there's a similar dynamic that happens for a lot of people, and I've been there, where this same dynamic happens at a bar, right? You
Hmm.
go to because there's a place for that, right? Uh, and a lot of times, if you keep going back and you can create relationships and meet new people and do things. That's not the healthiest route that I would advocate. That certainly not the point of this podcast is to go become a regular at your local bar, because that can go down a different path that can be quite unhealthy. Um, but there's a reason that it works, and I think it's a lot of the concepts that we're talking about uh, exist in that dynamic too, um, just in a slightly less beneficial manner. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
If it's taken to an extreme.
yeah, if it's, we all get hammered together every time, then yeah, slightly less beneficial. But what
Mhm.
you're pointing to with the bar example is true of all these others too, but maybe more so for the bar.
Is there a different way to do a bar?
What?
I That was a joke. I Never mind.
Oh, you mean you can go to the bar and not get hammered? Wait, what? I didn't hear that. Right.
No, I that's the
Oh,
problem. That's where I fell short.
oh, that
It
that was
was
a
just a
rule.
shit show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I'm in the bar, I am going to get hammered.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could choose to go to the bar and not get hammered, or you could choose to get hammered. But the point is, the bar is represents is representative of something that we talk about called touch points.
Mhm.
So when there is this loneliness piece, you were saying earlier, a lot of times when I recognized my loneliness, one of the needs that I had was to get out of the house,
Mhm.
change my environment,
And to your point earlier, it's loneliness and boredom. I
and
think was
boredom.
present in that. But yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, and we got to make sure to differentiate between the two, not confuse the two.
Mhm.
They can go together often, but
Mhm.
they're different, and it's important to notice the difference between the two of them. But the larger point is, let's say that we're talking about a newly divorced dad, or let's say we're talking about a single guy, or even a single couple, and they've moved to a new town because of a job, and they don't know anybody, they don't have family around, whatever the case may be. We need to develop, no matter who we are, no matter where we are, we need to develop what I call touch points. Uh, the places that we go with regular enough frequency for it to be regular, such that we start to get really comfortable and we kind of recognize a few of the people that work there or are patrons there. They start to recognize us and
Mhm.
we touch it frequently.
Mhm.
Can be your favorite coffee shop, can be your favorite pizza joint, can be a bar that you go to. And when you have a touch point, now you got that's on that confidence piece you were
Mhm.
talking about before. You're not
Mhm.
walking in cold. You're not walking in blind or as an unknown. You have developed a little bit of a familiarity. And that little bit of familiarity can go a long way in terms of comfort and confidence, which then positions us to be able to take that next step and strike up a conversation with a person about what they're drinking or what they're wearing or what game we're watching on the
Mhm.
TV or whatever the case may be. And a bar can be a really good place for that to occur. And certainly your local driving range or golf courses are touch points. You're going to go there frequently, right? And so if you go there frequently enough, you're going to start recognizing some people as familiar, even if you haven't spoken directly with them or they with you. But there's that little familiar nod or, hey, yeah, you look familiar to me. And
Mhm.
this environment seems familiar. And I know where to go. I know the bathroom that I'm going to use. And I have a few things that I know I really like to order off the menu here. And I know where to get my range balls and, which side of the range I like to hit from, or I really like
Mhm.
this particular hole in this course. That familiarity leads to confidence. And when we have that confidence and we're not so uncomfortable, we can start deploying the skills that I beg of everyone to remember you already have the skills to do this. You're just not accustomed to deploying those skills in this particular situation for this particular purpose.
Well, it's not only the skills, but it's pretty damn helpful to have something to say
Yeah, right.
when you're trying to start a conversation.
Right.
It's
Right.
not a minor detail.
It's not a minor detail. So if you have developed some sort of skill, that can be the thing you can speak confidently on, and then you see what happens after you roll the dice.
Mhm. And I think too that one of the things that I appreciated when we were talking about this before as well is this applies to not only hobbies and potentially new skills, but it could even be something as simple as reading a book,
Hmm.
right? I mean, certainly it's not it's not always the easiest thing to dive into a new hobby, though it's certainly worth the energy. But even just reading a book can give you so much to talk about. And on the social front, yeah, I mean, it doesn't suck to be pretty smart. I mean, books are good, right? So, and it actually on the dating front make you look like not a douchebag if people know you read.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And in addition to just enriching your life, and tapping into a little bit of intellectual or creative thinking, right? Independently. So let's acknowledge that if you're feeling lonely and you're at home, you don't have anywhere to go or anyone to be with, reading a book can be something that is pleasurable and enjoyable if you let it be.
Mhm.
But there is an example of how you're investing in yourself. And
Yeah.
remember, our recommendation here as the antidote for this epidemic of male loneliness is invest in yourself. So even if you never share any of the interesting or exciting things that you're reading, you're still investing in yourself. But to
Mhm.
your point, Tyler, it helps you become a better conversationalist.
Mhm.
Because even if the person that you end up talking with has not read this particular book or isn't even necessarily acquainted with the genre or even the industry from which it comes, when you're talking in an interesting, compelling, passionate way about something, then you're presenting yourself as someone who has a contribution to
Mhm.
make, someone who has a life that's going on outside of work and video games and your primary relationship or whatever.
Mhm.
And most people can find a way to merge onto that conversation even if they haven't read that particular book
Mhm.
or thought about that particular concept, and it's a wonderful conversation starter.
Yeah, and though I think we're both on the same page about being highly transparent. It also keeps you from just talking about yourself the whole time
Yeah.
in a way that would come off as uh, s- either selfish or perhaps overly needy.
Yes.
Though not saying don't ever do that. I'm saying on an initiation of a relationship, it may be early for that.
It may be, and to make sure that credit is given where credit is due, because you were joking about this before, and you said, if you have nothing to give, how do you build a relationship? Becomes one dimensional, right? So If you're sitting there wanting, needing, hoping to make friends, but you're on your heels waiting for everyone else to come to you and to
Mhm,
start the conversation and spark the interest, then
mhm,
what's in it for them?
mhm,
That's not reciprocal, right? So to be able to have something to give in those moments and to be able to have something to present or initiate to then
mhm.
allow for that to happen is crucial.
I remember this time a few years ago when I just got into this industry, and I bought this company, and I was trying to develop relationships with my new employees. And I found myself at one point in the car with one of my main key employees, and I remember he looked at me and he was like, "So what do you like to do for fun?" And I remember it stopped me in my tracks,
Mhm.
and I looked at him. I was like, "The hell are we talking personal stuff for right now?"
Yeah.
And it shocked me, um, because I realized, number one, I don't know, I didn't know what the hell I did for fun, because I was so unskilled at most of what we're talking about right now, at that point. But I was so out of balance. I didn't have any hobbies or even interests that anything that I uh, would allow of interest to occupy my time. It was all work.
Mhm.
And I remember it wasn't until I had something else to say that the relationship between us changed at all.
Mhm. Mm.
Because I could talk about work all day long, and I actually love talking about work because I love what I do.
Mhm.
But it was so um, singular and focused and unrelational.
Yeah.
It was a dead stop for the relationship.
Right.
We've since become wonderful friends, um, but it took me really coming out of my own comfort zone and actually making an investment in myself to have something else to give to the relationship. You know, outside of a paycheck in the business relationship,
Mhm.
on the personal level,
Mhm.
I had nothing.
Yep.
That's a terrible feeling.
For
Um,
you and for them, because it's a dead stop for them,
yeah,
and it's a self-awareness piece for you. You
yeah,
just realize, I became this one-dimensional person.
yeah.
What happened?
Well, shit, I wouldn't be friends with me either,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Because
because
it's
what
just
is there to
boring. I
grab a
mean,
hold of?
yeah, unless we have interesting work conversations, but other than that, and who wants that all the time?
Sure.
You know?
Sure. And if you have the kind of job where you can't really necessarily talk about what you do,
Hmm.
you know, that certainly is me. But I know a lot of people who work, let's say, in the engineering fields, and they work for, let's just say, big companies that get defense contracts or whatever. And it's not just that they're bound by NDAs. I mean, some of these people have security clearances and stuff like that. And quite honestly, we live in a world where, other companies, other countries will position people in bars or restaurants hoping that someone starts talking out of school about what they shouldn't be talking about after the influence of a couple drinks. And the next thing you know, you got a major thing that's, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. But the point
Hmm.
is, if you're one dimensional, and too many men have become exactly that, one dimensional.
Hmm.
They go to work, they're interested in work, they talk about work, that's sort of the only thing that they do, then what do you have to contribute relationally at all?
Yeah.
So when you were asked that question, what do you do for fun? It was an effort to humanize
Hmm.
and understand and relate to the boss.
And it was a wonderful attempt, and not even just the boss though, but me as a co-equal, right? As
Sure.
as a as a potential um, new relationship, and the friendship side of that, um, which like I've already stated, we've become very good friends now.
Mhm.
Um, but man, it took me a while too. That wasn't like I went and played golf that week and then I had something to say or something, like um, for me, I mean, it took me years
Mm,
actually.
mm. Yeah, and it's interesting, and then I had something to say. So,
Which translated into more relationship than that too, by the way. And that was something that I didn't even really get far more proficient at until after. I got divorced and actually got intentional about my time and cultivating new interests and hobbies and things.
And there's that word again, intentional. And you said this also, so I'm going to give credit where credit is due because you said
Well,
this
now
out
you're just
here.
making it weird, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, either I'm making it weird or it was weird, and I'm just stating what it is. But
Fair.
uh, one of the things that we can do, and you said this, those different dimensions of us, those pieces of us that are the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
If we're immersed in work, wife, parenting, we can let those things die. You said that, you can let it all die. And it's not that you're killing it, you're not doing it intentionally, but because you weren't intentional about touching that and keeping that, it
Mm-hmm.
did die. So then all of a sudden you end up in a conversation where somebody says, "Hey, what do you do for fun?" And you're like, "Work,"
Yeah.
you know? So those things can die if we don't continue to feed them, to cultivate them, to invest in them.
That
And
that would actually became one of the main issues in my marriage at the time,
yeah.
right? Is I own it. I fully let um, interests and hobbies and things just sort of fall away because I wasn't intentional.
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
present. I was a good dad. I provided. I did the
Hmm.
things, but relationally, um, I had very little to give, even back on that.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's a tough one to own when you really think about it or look at it. Um, but it's important to do.
It's very important to do, and I went through a very similar thing myself when I went through my version of that, and I think I can speak to one of the unintended negative consequences of that very well-intentioned effort to be a highly devoted parent as much as you can is if you don't at all focus on yourself, then you're not doing anything to mitigate your stress,
Mhm,
to rest, to have fun, to relax, which means that you're really not showing up as the best version of you consistently in the desired role of being a good parent,
mhm,
right? So, another reason, especially for people who are citing time constraints as the obstacle to this, I would say, listen, if you've made a value proposition to be a good partner, to be a good, business owner or employee, to be a good parent, this is a necessity
mhm,
because it helps you show up as the best version of you and also a more interesting and diversified version
mhm,
of you. That's the richness of life. So if you don't have any of those things going on and therefore don't have anything to contribute when you try and go out into the wild and make friends, what do you have to offer?
mhm,
If you don't do anything, or if what you do is so private and so unique that it's hard to connect to that at all, right?
And I think it's important to state too that for anybody listening that is feeling stuck in
Mm,
that place,
yeah.
in no way is this meant to imply or shame anything or anyone, because this can be a very difficult thing to do when you are feeling like you're in survival mode.
Oh gosh, yes.
This, hanging out with the guys or golfing or whatever is absolutely going to feel like the lowest priority of all,
Yeah.
when you're just trying to get through the day and just trying to get through the routine.
Yeah.
However, I think that taking a moment to consider, um, is it could there be some value in helping all of those other things by inserting this whenever you possible,
Right.
whenever you can,
Right.
and being able to maybe have that conversation with your partner,
Hmm.
because maybe they're not open to it.
Right.
Certainly, if they're in survival mode too, So I mean, this can be a tricky conversation potentially,
Hmm.
but it's worth a worthwhile one to have. I think is the point of what we're saying.
It absolutely is. And the way you have that conversation is through a rule proposal and a rule
There
negotiation
you go.
because it's really important that both of you have your independent life and your friend life
Yeah,
in addition to your couple life, your parenting life, your working life. And it
yeah,
is an extraordinary amount of things to balance for sure. But if we talk about this and we're unafraid to acknowledge that this is an important need and worthy of our
Mhm.
investment, then we can actually support one another in our efforts to do that rather than letting that become a battleground. And, especially dads, but also moms
Mhm.
getting criticized for doing things. So, a good example of this is just trying to go to the gym. People say that I don't have time because I got all these other things going on. But what really is happening often is they don't have a partner who's willing to support and endorse the time that their partner is investing in doing that.
Mhm.
And maybe that's because they're afraid or intimidated because the partner's going to change and they're not wanting to. Or maybe it's because they're resentful because now they think they got more time that they have to spend managing
Mhm.
kids and taking care of things while this person goes off and does that thing.
It's not fair,
It's
whatever
not
he's trying to do
fair.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a competition. And so when we realize that friendship is an essential component of healthy, well functioning, well adjusted life, and we give each other permission to cultivate that and to invest in that without that being a threat or a bother, we're really doing so much better. And again, I can't emphasize enough, if you have kids and you're citing that as one of the potential constraints to doing this, remember that you're always modeling behavior.
Mhm.
And so if you're resentful of a partner for having an independent life, what are you teaching the kids? That the partner that they're with shouldn't have an independent life. No, by the way, they can't have an independent life.
Mhm.
And that's not what we want to teach them either.
Yeah. And it might feel like a stretch to say, honey, I'm going to make an investment in myself and go play golf
Mm-hmm.
or something. I mean, even the way we frame it and communicate that need um, may get more appropriately communicated. Honey, I'm going to go play some golf. I'm feeling kind of lonely. I'm hoping to meet somebody.
Yeah. 'Cause notice,
Right.
what are you doing there?
Making a rule proposal and communicating your needs.
You are. And what was the thing that you did that made the proposal better and understandable? Do you recognize it?
Communicating the real need.
Yeah, the why.
Yeah, okay. It's another way to say it.
Meaning, if you just say, I'm going to go play golf, right? You got what? Only communication.
I got you.
You just added a really important, relatable why. I've struggling with loneliness. I would like to make some friends. I think this is a way for me to try and do that,
Hmm.
right? And by the way,
Much harder to say no to, by the way, in a non-manipulative way. I mean, that's because it's
yes,
truth, right?
yes, and it's harder to say no because we're not guessing at
Yeah,
or making a misattribution as to the why.
yeah.
So if we're willing to own our why and be honest and transparent about it, and yes, vulnerable about it, um, it's much more persuasive because it's more understandable.
Hmm.
And it reminds me, I shit you not, I
You
literally,
shat me not.
I shit you not, I, li- I literally facilitated a rule negotiation between a husband and wife who had been married for longer than 20 years and their children were grown about being able to play golf. And it was really interesting because in this particular marriage situation, the woman interpreted the man's desire to play golf as evidence that he didn't want to be with her. And she was therefore threatened by it. And then in the early parts of the negotiation was trying to insist that he do extra things with her to compensate for the lost time of him going to play golf.
Hmm.
And it's really extraordinary because she was interpreting his need for an independent life as rejection or as evidence that he was less into or interested in her.
Hmm.
And the unintended consequence of that perception and her objections to it is he was becoming less interested in that because of the demand that was being placed there.
Hmm.
On the other end of the spectrum, I know you and I are both on the wonderfully beneficial receiving end of partners who not only have never complained about that, but who encourage it,
Yeah.
really encourage it. And I'll confess, there were times early on when I was having some guilty feelings because I was doing this and taking time away that could be spent together. And I had to learn that those feelings of guilt were really my own prohibitive thoughts that were creeping in. And they were absolutely unnecessary because the honest, consistent, repeated message I was getting was, it's important for you to do that. Go do that. And it was never, oh, good, I don't have to deal with you for, I never thought that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was, honey, you love this. You're investing in this. It's good for you to do this. You don't have to be an apologist for it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like she doesn't have to be an apologist for then scheduling like a brunch with her friends or a spa day or whatever the case may be. Those things
Mm-hmm.
are really, really very important.
Yeah.
And I think what happens a lot of times amongst couples is one partner starts to feel threatened that their partner has any interest other than what that partner is saying the structured interests should be.
Mm-hmm.
So when we understand that friendship is an important part of healthy functioning life and good mental health, and we collaborate to facilitate that and support that with one another, we're much better off.
I've actually heard religious teachings that teach the very opposite of this,
Of course.
where it does actually state that you shouldn't have interests
Yeah.
outside of your partner,
Yeah.
and shouldn't even attend activities without them.
Uh-huh.
Um,
It, it,
so there's that too,
there is
as a
that.
potential real hurdle here.
Yeah. And, if those are your rules and those are your values, those are your rules and your values. And
Well,
I
those
guess,
are rules, but probably not the person's. If that's a struggle, that's not your rule.
oh, absolutely. Oh, I agree
Yeah.
100%. I
Yeah.
guess my charitable interpretation on that is to say that may mean that you're both invested highly in the same church values. And so you would be doing the same things and having that be satisfactory for you. But that's a very charitable interpretation. I find it to be absurd and unhealthy.
Yeah. I'm just throwing it out there because
Yeah.
I know that is a reality for
Yeah.
some, for some, for sure.
It is. And it's the reality of constraints. And more specifically, I think it's the reality of artificial constraints. And one of the most constraining artificial constraints is fear. And we, in the framework, what do we do when we recognize that? We realize, okay, that's a prohibitive thought because it begins with the internal dialogue, I don't want to, I'm afraid of. So when we acknowledge that, because that's real, we do what we do. We acknowledge the prohibitive thought. We then move it to the affirmative side. This is what I want to do. This is what I aspire to do. So when I explore and experiment with something, I decide to invest in it, coming to my partner, and I'm starting with an affirmative why. I feel lonely at times. I feel like I'm suffering because of a lack of friends. I'd like to make an investment in that and cultivate that a little bit. Here are the things that I'm considering. And then we move into proposal and negotiation. What do you need or want from me in order to feel comfortable or confident, accommodating this request? And then whatever the partner is talking about, we remember because we know the rule framework that the more we accommodate that request or that need, the more we're simultaneously investing and getting our own need met. And now we have a collaborative process and no conflict.
And I think it's also important to state that you can say to a partner that I'm lonely without that being a personal dig
Great.
or something, right? There's a genuine need for men to have friends, for women to have friends
Right.
outside of that partner relationship.
Right.
And that can be stated without it being anyone's fault. No one's doing anything wrong. That can exist just fine.
It can and it really should, because
Yep.
if you really put all your eggs in one basket, then notice you're inadvertently putting an extraordinary amount of pressure on your partner,
Yeah.
because now it's your partner's job to fulfill all of those needs. And that's really a burden to place upon someone. There should be a dispersion of needs fulfillment, and that dispersion is healthy and okay.
Mhm.
So it is good to get needs met from multiple sources, and friends is a very important one that only friends really can provide in
Mhm.
many ways.
Mhm.
So to your point, doesn't have to be threatening. It doesn't have to be that someone's not doing enough or that they can't do. It's really about having a more diversified approach. And you used this phrase earlier. You said, if you're thinking about investing when it comes to finances or financial matters, what do we do? The more diversified the portfolio, the more intelligent, healthier, safer, profitable it is. Same thing here. The more diversified we are in terms of the means by which we do need fulfillment, the better. So there's a balance there. There's things that there's needs that you only really meet in your romantic relationship, and that's appropriate and healthy and good. And then there's other needs that are met with male friends, female friends, that also is appropriate and good. And it need not be considered any kind of threat
Mhm.
or testimonial to some sort of inadequacy in the primary relationship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So, takeaway. We recognize that loneliness is a horrendous problem, and it leads to depression, it leads to anxiety. And let's just notice, when you're unsupported, you're lonely, you don't have a friend group, it's affecting younger men most, but it's affecting men disproportionately to women. We also know that leads to really big and scary things like suicide attempts, suicide completion. This is a very real thing we're talking about. We're not talking about,
Mhm.
I'm kind of bummed out because I don't go drinking with my buddies enough. Okay. We're talking about men who are absolutely lonely. They don't have anyone, or they don't have any friends. And what they feel is the obligations and the pressures that they have, but they don't have any sort of release, or whatever the case may be. This is a very real thing. And so all we're really kind of offering on this as a takeaway, in addition to acknowledging that it's real and talking about it in an honest way, is a proposal really for your consideration, that the antidote to loneliness is social connectedness and interdependence. Well, sounds good. How do you do that? Well, we think the way that you do that is you make an intentional decision to invest in doing a little exploration, a little experimentation, to find an activity, to find a hobby, to find an interest, to find more than one, and then cultivate it. When you cultivate it, you get better at it, you get more comfortable with it, more confident with it. And then that thing that you've cultivated, whatever it is, or those things, there's places to do that out there in the wild. And there's other people who do that similarly to you out in the wild. So if you gather with others who are similarly situated, you may be finding a part of your tribe. And when you do, you are positioned better than ever before at really doing something about and addressing the loneliness piece.
Mhm.
And that's just the conversation starter. You're here to play golf. I'm here to play golf. And then when we have other things to talk about, like what do you do for fun in addition to golf, or what do you do
Mhm.
for a living? Now, all the relationship skills that you already have, that you've deployed in other situations, can come out and come to fruition, so long as you have something remotely interesting to talk about. And if you've got that, and you're willing to listen and find interesting to the things that they're talking about, then it's just a pragmatic skill set and getting out of your own way, and no more prohibitive thoughts. And you make an intentional commitment to yourself to say, you know what? I like this dude. I'm going to ask him for his phone number to see if he wants to get together and have a cup of coffee, play another round of golf again, or go shoot some hoops, or do whatever. But you're going to put yourself out there. And just like in dating, You're going to ask for the number. You're going to say, hey, would you like to get together again? This was fun. I enjoyed this. And you might get rejected. You might not get called or texted back. Things may get weird, but look at dating, you know, that may happen to you 10 times. And then one person says yes. And the next thing you know, that's your person, right? Same thing with friends. It's the same process. It doesn't have to be this confusing, daunting thing. Don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. Put yourself out there the way you would if you were dating. Say, hey, man, it's a really good time. Enjoyed it. Would you like to get together again? Can I get your number? That simple.
It is that simple. And I hope that, because having been through this process deeply, having been tremendously alone and lonely and friendless, I hope that what has been communicated tonight is really a simple encouragement to make the investment into something as simple as reading a book or finding a new interest,
Yeah.
and see where that goes. Because there is a way out of that. And I know it can feel very, um, I'm not going to say lonely, because it can feel impossible
Mm-hmm.
to get out of that place and to sort of overcome that. And
Yeah, it
hopefully,
can.
this is a simple word of encouragement to give that a shot, because there's some pretty simple steps here. It can be hard. Give it a try.
Yeah,
because it works.
it does. Perfectly said. And thank you for your friendship.
You as well, my friend.
Yeah. And thank you for listening. We hope you find this helpful. And Tyler said it perfectly. Nothing need more be said. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
Good night.